Hello, welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Muerore. At Book Talk, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book. And today we have a great guest with us. And I remember those times I used to watch TV as I was growing up. I see the circus people playing, swinging right, left, and center. And then I would see some seals playing in the water. That's what our guest is going to entertain us with today, about a story of a seal. Now, I won't talk much about that. I'll just bring our guest today on the show. Hi, Gary Bohan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor that to have you on our show. We are glad and we want to hear more about Sharkey, the book.
Sharkey. So Sharkey is the title of a new book that I just wrote and just got published a couple months ago. It's Sharkey, When Sea Lions Were Stars of Show Business. So Sharkey was a trained sea lion, and sea lions back in the day were often called seals, trained seals, but the fact of the matter is they were usually almost all the time a trained seal was actually a trained California sea lion, as was Sharkey. And
Okay.
so Sharkey was trained by my great-grandfather, which is how I came to know of the story. And Sharkey, fruitful career. Sharkey and his predecessors, and my great-grandfather was involved in SEAL training for many decades, but his star pupil, the best student he ever had, was a California sea lion named Sharkey. And Sharkey is the topic of the book.
Beautiful. So you come from California yourself?
I don't know. I come from New York. I come from upstate New York, so
Okay.
which is where my great-grandfather, Mark Hewling, where he and his family were raised. So no, there was actually a fellow in California that would get the seals right from the ocean. His name was Captain McGuire, and he fancied himself a bit of a talent scout. So he had all these metrics for what would make a good trained SEAL, and him and his assistants would go to the Catalina Islands, for example, and go to the Rocky Coves, and much like a sports or entertainment talent scout, they would seek out talent, and they would do this for trainers and circuses and aquariums and zoos throughout the world. These Captain McGuire and his assistants in California, and Sharkey went from the coastal waters of off the coast of California and ended up in upstate New York, where he was trained by my great-grandfather, Mark Hewling.
Now, what fascinated you so much that you decided to write the story of this seal?
Well, that's a great question, because growing up, my family really didn't talk about the story all that much. And so it wasn't until I heard a podcast about 6 years ago, and the story of the podcast centered around Sharkey. And so I learned all of these things I had never learned before, very late into my adulthood. And so I started digging around on the internet and so forth and so on. And what fascinated me was a couple of things. One was just the scope and breadth of Sharkey's career. He starred on Broadway. He went to Hollywood and was in a hit movie. He played the biggest theater palaces in the United States. And when television came of age, he was on all of the top television shows. So his fame intrigued me, and how it all came to be intrigued me. But really what made me write the book was I kept on seeing just the strong bonds between not only Sharkey, but the other sea lions and my great-grandfather, and just the love and affection that the trainer had for the animals and the affection that they showed in return really to me was the icing on the cake that really uh, made it a story I felt that was worth telling.
Hmm. Beautiful. And if I may ask, uh, did you have to, have contact with Shaki?
No, Sharkey died a couple years before I was born. So I never met Sharkey in person. I never met my great grandfather. He died as well before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
But my father grew up with Sharkey around, so he was, and he's still alive. So I was able to interview him on many occasions and learn the ins and outs of what made Sharkey tick and how the training facility, which was quite a facility in upstate New York, my hometown. And so I got a lot of information from him. But no, I did not. To answer your question, I never did get to meet Sharkey.
Mm. Yeah, there are those stories that we always hear that make a big difference in our lives, stories that happened years ago in our lineage, our ancestors. And I want to hear it. I want to remember it. And most of all, I want it to be remembered and heard and remembered by people who are going to come after me, because that's why
No,
we. Mhm.
that's precisely the point. And here was a story. Uh, Now my father's now in his early 80s, and he had all this information tucked up in his head that I was able to extract, but largely. So here's this very famous sea lion, probably the most famous trained seal in the history of show business, and trained by my family, and that no one talked about, and the whole story was about ready to get lost to history, just disappear. So if I'm proud of anything, I'm proud that I revived the story and was able to interview enough people, my father as well as others who had direct contact, was able to cull various archives around the world and put together this story for exactly like you say, for not only people of this generation, but for generations to come. The story will be forever preserved. I'm very happy about that.
That's very good of you. And I am wondering, how long did it take you from the time that the idea came to you to the time that you had a book in your hand? How long was that?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, six
Oh.
years. So
Mhm.
I would have never, ever thought it would take 6 years. So in effect, I'm writing a biography of a trained SEAL. How long could it take? But there was so much information out there, and I wanted to get it right. And so when I started it, I mean, 2 years, maybe three, but six. It took me all of 6 years, and I was busy the whole. I worked on it just about every single day. So now, when I hear other authors, especially in this realm, historians, if you will, and they talk about their years and years of research, I've got a newfound appreciation because it takes a long time to gather the material, and then of course to write it and to do all the interviews. But it was extremely rewarding. I enjoyed every second of it.
And I'm wondering to myself also, is it written in a novel style or in a nonfiction
It's
kind of?
it's written in what's called narrative nonfiction.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think of authors like Eric Larson writes in that style. Laura Hillenbrand, she wrote Seabiscuit and Unbroken. Eric Larson's written several books. So the idea is where you've got really good source material, where you've got dialogue, where you've got action. You try to write it like it's a thriller, like it's a not like it's a standard nonfiction book, to make it more interesting to the reader. So where you've got enough information to craft scenes and really bring the story to life, that's exactly what you try to do. So it's really not as dry as a regular nonfiction book, as what you might expect a regular nonfiction book to be. And like I said, when you've got the material, you really run with it. You really go with it and try to bring the story to life.
Hmm, that's interesting. And as another thing that maybe I could be interested, or the or listener or
Hmm.
viewer could be interested in knowing, and especially those people who have an idea of publishing a book, how easy was it to present the idea out there? Did you get a publisher, or did you just go your own way because the
I
story?
did. And I
Mhm.
did get a publisher, but before I got a publisher, I got a literary agent. So the literary agent was, in fact, the one that found the publisher for me. But it was a lot of, if I hadn't gotten a literary agent who had secured a publisher, I suppose I would have self-published because I was this story was going to get out there one
Mm,
way or the other. But I was very fortunate. I know a lot of there's many that aren't lucky enough to get a literary agent, but I was able to get a literary agent who found a publisher. So it's traditionally published through SUNY Press, which is a university press in New York, and so it worked out quite well. And it really has been that whole process has been a fabulous, if not at times frustrating and unnerving, because it's not so easy to get a literary agent, and it's not so easy to find a publisher. But if you, in my case, I just hung in there, and it all worked out.
yeah, it's a big challenge for many people to go to become published authors. So when you've successfully published such a book, it tells a story. Maybe that story of the courage of your great grandfather, excuse me, of taking a seal and training it. Because I understand when you are training a person, that's the one thing. When you're training an animal, it's a totally different thing. You've got to be patient, you've got to concentrate, you've got to be uh, someone who's highly intelligent to keep on moving until you have the results.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the quotes that's in the book was my great grandfather, Mark Hewling, was described himself as the most patient man alive. So patience, patience was a virtue. The technique that he used really relied on a couple of things. First and foremost was being kind to the animals. So there's documentation of him uh, in newsreel footage talking about that the utmost kindness has to be practiced at all times. There's his writings that talk of the same, and and so it was the kindness and the strong bonds that he formed with not only Sharkey but the many other. He trained well over 100 sea lions over the course of his career, and so once he had established the bond through kindness, the rest of the training came along rather quickly, and he was very. It's some of the footage I've got, some of the interactions. It's very heartwarming to look because the seals they're showing him nonstop affection, and he's just so gentle with them. And I think that more than anything was the key. And once that those had been established, those parameters had been established, then they responded extremely well to the training.
Hmm. And I'm glad that you bring out such important virtues. You talk of kindness, you talk of patience. And these are the messages that we should be passing on to just about everyone, and especially the young ones who are growing up. And in writing this book, apart from preserving that history to the coming generation. I know that
Mhm.
there's a message that you want the reader to get from the book, more than even what you've just mentioned. What more would you want us to get from reading the book?
So, as I've been talking about the bond, the special bond between the trainer and animals, that's one of the themes throughout the book. The other is just if you're into history, especially entertainment history, the the sea lions over the course. Now, this book starts in 1907 and goes all the way to 1958, and they were rubbing shoulders with, when I say in the title of the book, when sea lions were stars of show business, I really mean they were stars of show business. They were rubbing shoulders with all of these great names. And so if you have any interest in show business history, right from tented circuses and vaudeville, my great grandfather Mark Hewling was with Ringling Brothers for many years, and they played the top vaudeville theaters. And then, believe it or not, they did radio. It was one of the sea lions could sing. Actually, so he would get on the radio and sing.
Mm.
In fact, in fact, would sing with an orchestra. And so they did radio, and they did, as I mentioned previously, Sharkey was on Broadway. Broadway, working with all these famous stars. He did a Broadway musical comedy by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart called Higher and Higher. Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart, if you know your Broadway musicals, I mean those two are icons
Hmm.
of the Broadway musical. And so you get to see all the transitions from silent movies to talkies to radio to Broadway to Hollywood, and then television in the late 40s. When television comes of age, Sharkey is on all the top shows. He's on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was very popular show in the 50s on into the 60s and early 70s. Sharkey was with Bob Hope, Imogene Coca, who was really television's first female comic celebrity, even before Lucille Ball. Sid Respondents' Dinner of 1944, in fact.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'll be willing to go and find out whether in the story there is a Shaki drops the mic at the correspondence dinner. But anyway, you talk about Shaki singing being one of the tricks or the talents that Shaki had, or the training that he got from your grandfather. Which other tricks did you find out that he did?
So Sharkey had he had a lot of talents. And one of the things I found out in my research is these, much like human beings, the sea lions, they each had different skills and different abilities. And so my great grandfather Mark Hewling would cater towards the specific skills of each sea lion. Now, Sharkey happened to be special in that he had a multitude of skills, but really, two of the many things. Well, there was actually several things that Sharkey did, but one of them, truly, was comedy. So now, when we think of comedy, you're thinking, well, wait a minute. What do you mean comedy? So Sharkey, truly, and I've seen it. I've seen it. It's a real thing. And there's my not only my great grandfather, but Hollywood directors, other comedians, actors. They all said he knew how to work a crowd. He knew how to work a camera, and oftentimes with just the slightest bit of direction, he would find a way to get laughs. He knew how to get laughs. So, it's at first I had a little trouble believing it, but I kept on reading one review after the other from Billboard and Variety and all the trade magazines, and I'm thinking that everyone's talking about Sharkey the comedian, And then when I saw some footage of him, he really had personality. He really had comedy, and to a large degree, um, Mark Hewling didn't get in the way. He fostered it and let Sharkey uh, do his thing, and so more often than not, he would have audiences rolling in the aisles with laughter.
Hmm.
So comedy. And I there's when he was on Broadway, I actually had the script, so I knew what he was supposed to do, and then I'd look at the reviews and whatnot, and he worked. He had a scene with Jack Haley, who we all know is the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and the two of them would go off script and improvise this certain comedy routines and tricks. So odd as it might sound to those first hearing this, Sharkey was truly a comedian of the highest order.
And I believe that because I have seen in variety shows some of the dogs that are trained to do some interesting things, even a chicken playing piano to the sound.
Hmm.
So when you say that he was a comedian, I believe it. And in that case, do we have links in the book where we can watch some of the? If I believe they are there on the YouTube or somewhere else.
There are some. I've got a Facebook page, so
Hmm.
if and I've got a website. So I've got a little bit of footage of Sharkey, video footage of Sharkey on the website. I'm trying to think what I've got. I've got a movie trailer of him with Abbott and Costello. They were a famous.
The fact that you were not there during Shaki, you indeed put a lot of effort in your research, and finally coming up with a book. It justifies 6 years period.
Mm.
Hmm. Sure, it was hard work.
It was, it was hard work, but like I said, I loved every minute. I would often work on the book in the early hours of the morning. So before I go to work, and so it'd be pitch black out, and but those were some special times, and it would be early in the morning, and it would just be me and my morning coffee, and it was such a labor of love, and trust me, there was never any doubt in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to get this story out. It just, but like I said, I wanted to make sure I had all my facts straight. I wanted to bring the story to life as best I could, and yeah, it just took time.
Great, wonderful. So, for those who would want to get the book, I believe they can get it from your website. And where else?
It's yeah. So if you go to my website, there's a couple options. Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble. You can order directly from the publisher, SUNY Press. And Indie Book, if you want to go to your local bookstore, there's a link called Indie Book. And if you type in your address or zip code, that gives you area bookstores where you can buy from a small local independent bookstore, as I know many people are doing today. So there's all sorts of different ways to get the book.
Hmm. Yeah, so we will go and get the book. Yeah, you viewer, go get the book and read more about Shaki, the comedian. And yes, we thank you. But before you go, at Book Place, we always ask the author to leave us with some few words that we'll always remember. And this is your chance.
Oh boy, a few words. Well, in terms of anyone out there that might be aspiring to be an author, I would say just persistence, just stick with it. Try to write every single day and write from your heart, and you will be rewarded in the end.
Hmm, beautiful. If you have a story out there, Gary says write it, and I believe each and every one of us has a story. So wait no longer. Wake up tomorrow morning and start writing that story that is just about to be forgotten in the past.